5, 6, 7, 8.
Welcome to the EX Podcast, where every week I talk with business leaders, authors, and disruptors on how the workplace is changing. The podcast brings a different lens to the conversation around HR transformation, company culture, and employee engagement. It offers a brand and customer experience perspective rather than a traditional HR perspective. Why? Because companies have to think of themselves as employment brands if they hope to attract and retain talents. It is time we put people first to rehumanize the workplace. Simply because leaders who don't care about their employees will eventually be surrounded by people who don't care about their business. Today's guest is Alex Goryachev, Managing Director of Innovation Strategy at Cisco. Today with Alex, we talk about what innovation means at Cisco and how it drives employee engagement, why middle managers are pivotal to innovation within any organization, and how can such managers help develop an innovation culture, drive engagement and innovation. Support for this podcast is brought to you by Culture Amp. Eliminate the guesswork of company culture with Culture Amp, the world's largest independent employee feedback platform. Culture Amp goes beyond aggregating survey results to deliver rich insights and data-driven action plans on an easy-to-use interface. With a powerful platform, science-backed surveys, and a focus on its customer success, Culture Amp helps you increase employee engagement and build a positive company culture. Start developing a deep understanding of your employees' experience today by visiting cultureamp.com/ex. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Alex. And because it takes a good amount of time to produce this podcast, please make sure to review the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or YouTube, as it will help promote the contents. If you want me to speak at your next event, get some advice on your EX initiatives, or send me feedback and suggestions for future topics or guests, you can reach me at svincent@exsummit.com or on Twitter at @EX_summit. All right, let's get to it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the EX Podcast. Very excited for today's guest, Alex Goryachev. Alex is calling from San Diego. He is the Managing Director of Innovation Strategy at Cisco. Alex, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be on the show. Thank you so much for having me.
Tell us a bit about your backgrounds and what does the Managing Director of Innovation Strategy at Cisco does exactly?
So maybe I start with the last, part of the question. You know, when you think about innovation at Cisco, right? Innovation is part of our DNA. So there are over 74,000 employees in our company, and I truly believe that, each one of us touches innovation and strategy every day. I'm lucky to be in a role where I can go and lead some of our co-innovation efforts with our customers and academia and ecosystem around the world in our co-innovation centers. And the other part of my role is really to work across Cisco to engage our employees with the ecosystem and, most importantly, with each other around innovation topics. And maybe to answer the first part of your question, my background, I've spent over a decade at Cisco in a variety of roles. From engineering to marketing and other function. But to me, it's all about making a big company work and the work as a single unit to meet the needs of our customers. And prior to Cisco, I worked for music industry. I actually was a part of a team at a little startup called Napster and was instrumental to digitizing the music industry. If I think about the entertainment industry, right, it's pretty much an early adopter of the internet, right? When we think about digitization, a lot of the curve that people are going through, it's something that music industry went over a decade ago, right? And for me personally, it was a very interesting journey because, as you and many of your listeners know, Napster as a company did not survive. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it did disrupt the music industry. So it's how do you survive and how do you grow and disrupt at the same time is something that I'm passionate about.
In your introduction, you mentioned that every employee in any organization has the potential to make an impact on innovation. You don't have to be within an innovation team or lab to drive innovation. How does it work? And how do you view innovation in, let's say, a medium to a large size company?
It's an excellent question, right? When we think about innovation, right, innovation is nothing new. It's been really occurring for centuries, right? It's just that the pace of change with technology really accelerated. So when we think about innovation, I think it's a very loaded word, right? Like, what's innovation? Everything is innovation, right? So I think it's important for the purpose of our discussion to separate innovation from invention, right? And when you think about invention, invention can be done by a single individual. In fact, most of the inventors worked alone, right? They would go somewhere in a cave or, on an island or just somewhere in their daily process. They've invented something, or they might have worked on it for decades. But if I think about innovation is all about execution. So innovation is a team sport that requires every single employee, because at the end of the day, when we think about invention, yes, it can be done by one person. When we think about innovation, let's think about anything that has been brought to market. No single person can do this alone, and that's why it actually requires all employees participating.
Completely agree, and it makes me think of a definition that I read a long time ago about innovation, which was the commercialization of an idea, which is pretty much what you're saying as well.
Right, and I want to be respectful. There are a lot of, there's so many things that were invented. There are people that work in R&D and life sciences industry, and where they invent stuff every day, and not everything goes to market. So I think it's very unfair to call that, not call that innovation, right? But at the same time, I think it's just important when we look at the teamwork across the enterprise that we really not only focus on ideas, but focus, to your point, on execution, commercializing. And what's commercializing, right? When you think about that, that's making things happen for a particular market. So that market could be internal, right? It does not have to be a new product. It could be a better process, right? It could be a shorter line in your company cafeteria, and that's innovation as well.
How employees in organizations can be or can take part of or leads innovation? Does it have to be a very specific team that is solely focused on innovation? Can someone in sales or accounting or a call center drive or impact innovation?
Absolutely, right? So if I think about, any team can impact innovation, right? Because at the end of the day, I think it's very important for any team or any company of any size, be that startup or be a large company, to actually start with defining why. Right? So, of course, innovation is good, right? Nobody's arguing that. But I think companies or teams getting on the same page, why do we want to innovate, is a phenomenal thing, because that there will be a meeting of the minds, right? And there would be a goal and a strategy, right? And I think it's important that people understand why they innovate and there is a focus, because yes, innovation for the sake of innovation is a fun process, right? I think this is what just happens in our life. But when you're in a business environment, at the end of the day, it's, do we want to grow the business? Do we want to protect it? What are the metrics that innovation impacts? Innovation does not exist in a vacuum. It's not an end goal. It's a means to an end.
You believe middle managers are pivotal to innovation within an organization. Why?
Because they're the glue, right? I really believe that when you think about the middle managers, right, they're actually, not to discount the senior leadership, right, and not to discount the employees, but the middle managers are the ones that truly drive the machinery, corporate machinery every day, and they're the ones that connect the strategy from the top with the execution. So at the end of the day, it's essential. I mean, most of the companies, let's admit it, they're run by middle managers, right? So it's essential that middle managers get on the same page with each other, their leadership, and their employees as to what are the goals, what is the company strategy, and what role innovation can play there. So in essence, when you're a middle manager, you need to manage up, you need to manage down, and you need to manage horizontally. And I think it's actually, in many cases, their role to define what innovation means for their teams and for their employees.
We talk a lot about the level of disengagement of employees in organizations, which is a huge problem to drive innovation, right? In order to drive successful innovations, you need to have engaged and committed employees to be able to share their passion and drive or take a project forward. How do you manage this within your team or the projects you work on at Cisco to drive that engagement, to get people motivated and to be able to execute and drive those projects forward?
At the end of the day, right, if we go back, when you think about the startup, right, every startup was a motivated team at certain point. Right. And then generally, as startups grow and then they become larger and larger and larger, somehow things become less engaging and more political, and folks disengage. Right. And I think the most important thing that at Cisco that we've managed is to really keep that startup DNA. And when we think about that mentality, is everyone has a voice and everyone is listened to, and when our employees have good ideas, not only we celebrate them, but we actually act on them, right? And when our employees have ideas that may not be a good fit with Cisco's business model, we give them feedback, right? So it really comes down to a sense of common purpose, understanding of our strategy, and a common value and a belief system and a communication. And I think that's what we're doing very successfully.
We talk more and more about project-based work. And that's, people not necessarily stay within the same function for the entire career or work on the same type of projects day or week after week after weeks. There's more cross-functional work. And you may work on a project for a short period of time and then move to another one and probably never work with the same people from one project to another. And it goes back to that startup mentality and mindset that we were talking about, where you have to work on small teams to be able to drive innovation and get things done pretty quickly. Is it what happens at Cisco?
Yeah, and I think at Cisco, of course, in any company there are many projects, right? I think what you've highlighted something that's very important. When you think about a large company, right? A large company, there are many advantages of a large company, but really, when it comes down to innovation, it's the common knowledge of employees and the ability of a large company to align and scale ideas globally. Right, so it's ability to come up with ideas and scale it globally. So when you think about people working on the projects, I actually think it's phenomenal because a project is something that has a purpose, right? And it's connected to the strategy. But most importantly, when people move from one area to another, they better understand the business and they form the connections. And they're exposed to different way of thinking, right? They know by definition, they know they learn other customers, other markets, other company functions. And that truly brings in innovative ideas, because innovative ideas come from inclusion and diversity. And that's the inclusion and diversity of thoughts that you have when you rotate through the organization.
How do you assemble a team around an innovation project? Do you pick and choose deliberately the type of, not necessarily individuals, but profiles or mindsets to tackle a specific project?
I mean, generally, when we think about, innovation projects at Cisco, there's so many of them, right? Mm-hmm. I can really speak about when we carry forward with employee ideas, the advice that we give them is, look, of course there are founders. These are the people that have ideas, right? Some of us have ideas. Some of us are in support of other people's ideas, right? And it's important that everybody plays a role, and that there are founders and there are people that are, making the idea happen, and they're of equal importance as the people that came up with the idea. So we encourage all of our employees to build a cross-functional team when they execute, and they really kind of always mimic company functions, right? Because if you're an engineer and you have an innovative idea, well, you need to know the biggest question is not can it be built, but should it be built, right? This is where you need product marketing, people with expertise in product marketing and exposure to customers, right? And then how do you take it to market? How you do commercialize it, right? This is where the marketing comes in, sales, and other folks. So it's essential that when you think about your idea, you bring in people from different functions on board. So we always encourage cross-functional teams. And most importantly, you think this through and you gain experience. You actually gain knowledge about how the industry work and how does what are the needs of our customers.
Where are innovative projects generated at Cisco? Does it come from the leadership team and say, no, we need to work on this? Or is it something that comes from the bottom line? Employees say, you know what, I heard that our customers are facing this type of challenge, and I think that's, we could address those challenges by doing this. How does it work? Is it from the top down, or is it also from the bottom up?
Well, I think honestly, I think it's across, because there's so many organizations, so many employees. I really think it's across all the layers, right? Because, not only we understand the opportunities, right, that might be understood by a sales team, right? We actually have a technology vision that can set that can change the industry, that comes from our engineering organization. And then we really have strategy that comes from the top and from the leadership that has a global view on a lot of our customer problems. I think where it comes from is from that petri dish of collaborating across all of those levels, right? Because when opportunity can influence strategy, and strategy can influence opportunity, that's where magic happens, right? And that's innovating with a purpose. And to your point, it's solving customer problems. It's improving employee experience in a company. It's giving back to the society, and of course we're a business, right? So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we bring in value to our shareholders, and that our products are out there and they solve customer problems. Maybe if I can. Basically, of course, there's centralized innovation function, right? Because in many organizations there are innovation functions because they help orchestrate those activities, and they can help and direct and lead or support and coach, right? But at the end of the day, right, innovation is a state of mind, right? It's a state of being. So it really comes from a mindset, and that mindset can only exist in a company that can walk the talk and actually provide the tools to execute, right?
And that was actually my next question. How do you identify the right people to take on to lead an innovative or innovation project? Because obviously, as you said, it's a specific mindset. Not everybody can drive innovation. So how do you pick and choose the right people?
Well, I think it's making sure that you have people with different points of view, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there are founders and there are managers, right? So if we look across the startup universe, yes, many people might have came up with ideas, but then they go and then the professional managers come in, or they take a support role. I think the most important thing, really, for any innovation to succeed in a company is a win together attitude, right? At the end of the day, it's all about how we win together across the company, and how do we leverage all company functions to go and benefit the customer. And I think that's the biggest mindset. If there's a mindset of, we're going to go and hide somewhere and be a lonely innovator, that's the wrong type, because yes, inventions could happen, but it's unlikely that those inventions can be taken to the market in a very accelerated fashion.
When you drive innovation projects, or when you drive innovation strategy within a company, obviously there's probably higher probabilities of failing than succeeding. And how do you put in place metrics that are a bit more realistic with the risk-taking aspect of driving innovation versus just driving business operations and products that are already launched on the market, where you know that you have more specific ways to measure the outcomes?
I really think that it really depends on the industry. When I think about Cisco's innovation strategy, right, and kind of the way we innovate, we really look at this across 5 pillars, right? The first one is we build our own products, and we have over 24,000 engineers that are working on the projects, right, and building the technology of today and tomorrow, right? That's our technology. The second one is we actually buy companies, right? We acquire companies if we need to scout enter a particular market, or, for example, whenever that comes to geography or technology. The third one is about investing, right? And the fourth one is about partnering, and the fifth one is about co-development with others, right? So if you think about this as a balanced innovation portfolio, you can manage your risks, right? Because you can take risks building new products, or you can take risks investing, right? At the end of the day, it's all about bringing value to the business. And again, it's thinking about what is the metric that you're trying to move, right? Are you trying to move profitability? Are you trying to move growth, customer retention? And that's when innovation comes in, right? Innovation is a means to an end.
The innovation is a means to an end, definitely. So who is responsible for driving an innovation project? You mentioned earlier that the main managers are the ones truly driving innovation. But is it the responsibility of everybody on the team? Is it something that is driven mostly by the leadership team? How does it work?
I mean, again, if you think of Cisco, I think the innovation mindset is in every employee, right? When we think about structurally, of course, our leadership, our very senior leadership, gives us direction, and at the same time, I know that we have a process where employees with great ideas can get in front of that senior leadership team and actually influence them. If I think about structurally, for example, in engineering, right, we have a chief technology and architecture office, which is the largest innovation team at Cisco. And that team drives the network of Cisco's co-innovation centers, where we co-innovate with our customers. And then in a number of other critical programs, for example, how we incubate technology and how do we come up with new solutions? But at the same time, I want to tell you that there's innovation in every function, right? If you look at the HR, and HR came up, you know, with tremendous ideas when it comes to innovation. The most important one is innovation is about talent. So when we think about Cisco and how Cisco talks about innovation, in just generally like employee experience, right? It's all about connecting everything, right? And we are in the connectivity business in many ways, right? It's about innovating everywhere and benefiting everyone, right? If you look at marketing, in order to be successfully marketing today, you have to understand the digital marketing, for example, and that's where innovation happens every day. So I would say that innovation is everywhere.
Can you share with us maybe one or a couple of projects that you've led and talk us through all the different steps and phases from the genesis of the idea to putting the team together to the prototyping and iteration, getting feedback from the markets up to the launch?
Absolutely. So let's, for example, let's go to Australia for a second. The reason I'm bringing up Australia is because we just finished an event actually this week called Cisco Live Australia, where we've showcased a lot of innovative solutions that are of value to our customers and partners. So if I think about Australia, one of the critical components of the country is the agriculture sector, right? There is a vast amount of land. There are a lot of farmers, and when we think about the value that technology could bring to that field, it's incredible, right? We could literally digitize the agriculture, and that way we could not only manage our land better and more responsibly, we can actually understand things like environmental conditions. We can predict the crop yield. We can have data around how we can do this better next year, and then how we manage risks. So when we looked at this from an opportunity perspective, it was very clear that that's something that's of interest to Cisco, and it's definitely of interest to the country. So in our innovation center in Australia, we formed an alliance with a Farmers Federation and a number of other parties, including a university and a startup. And we said, hey, how about we go and run a prototype to solve that problem, right? And then we partnered with farmers on the ground to actually look at how we can leverage Cisco equipments and what are the business opportunities that can be created in the country for a partner ecosystem, right? And at the end of the day, we went through, from a whiteboarding session to actual prototype to a deployed product. We've actually created something that's a local solution, that's great for the farmers, that speaks to country's advantages, right? That provides value to Cisco, and it provides value to our ecosystem of partners that can go and take the product to market. And I think the brilliancy of this, when it works within the Cisco Innovation Centers, is then we can look at that problem, look at that solution, and then apply it in some other country and help others solve similar problems.
So when you identify the opportunity for innovation, where do you start and how do you put the team together? How do you identify the right people or the right roles or profiles to put on the team to drive that project?
I mean, it honestly depends on the specific opportunity, right? So if I think about if we think about that agriculture project, right? So the first thing I would say that this is a cross-functional project, right? But it's actually a consortia with outside parties, right? So it's really how do we bring in how do we kind of combine Cisco with an outside world? And of course, it begins with a customer, right? So when we think about the opportunity, yes, there's opportunity, yes, there's Cisco, but let's bring the customer in early. I think that's very important, right? In this particular case, it's a farmer, right? Let's bring somebody who actually understands the industry and implications beyond one than one farmer, right? And that's a federation of farmers. So let's bring in an industry group, and then let's bring in a partner, right? A partner that a go-to-market partner that really understands the specific of deploying technology in the country, and of course, let's bring together a university because. Well, we all know they're great. Cisco came out of a university, right? The universities is where our future is because of the leaders of tomorrow are in those universities right now. So the first thing is really to assemble an ecosystem project, and in that ecosystem project, besides your company, I think it would be essential to have a contact with the university, to have a contact with a startup community, with an industry group, and with a customer, and obviously a go-to-market implementation partner. So that's kind of on the outside world. And of course, it can change, right? But generally, it's essential that we have different components there, and we bring in the customer early. And then from the inside, I think it's truly getting engaged across getting other stakeholders on board and listening to them. So it's truly getting a cross-functional team in early.
What do you see as the biggest obstacle for innovation?
Siloed mentality. I actually think that the biggest obstacle to innovation is a product-focused siloed mentality, right? So if you think about innovation, what the most important thing, and I so appreciate that you ask about the roles, right? Innovation is about the people. It's about innovators. When you go to a venture fund, right, and you say, "Hey, I have a great idea," they'll probably ask you a couple of questions, and I would bet that two questions would come up first, right? A, what is your idea? And I'm sure that kind of when you think about venture capital, they probably heard all of the ideas in the world.
Probably.
Right? And then the second question would be, and that question is far more important. And I know you know the question because you ask about it, and it's who is on your team, right? Because it's teams, cross-functional teams that make innovation happen, right? That take it from an idea to an execution and a sustainable product, right, and make it successful. So I truly believe that the biggest roadblock to innovation is lack of cross-functional collaboration and lack of collaboration across the ecosystem.
Now we're getting towards the end of the podcast. So let me ask you some fun questions before we wrap it up. So you've worked through multiple different disciplines and functions at Cisco, from sales, marketing, operations, and now innovation. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt? You've already done a lot of things, but something that you've never done that you would like to attempt.
It's an interesting thing. Yesterday, I was going through my Facebook, and a friend of mine, she posted a quote that says, the only impossible journey is the one that you never took, right? One thing that I really appreciate about Cisco is the ability to work in different functions and learn about things. Honestly speaking, there's so many things that I want to do. I think the only function that I haven't worked at Cisco is legal, and I'm married to an attorney, and I'm actually married to an IP attorney. I truly understand the complexities of of a legal world. So I'll probably, before I got married, I was thinking, I really want to be an attorney. And then once I got married, I actually appreciated how hard that is, and I quickly understood that, hey, I'm not qualified. So not sure about the job that I want, but I definitely know I'm not qualified to be an attorney.
All right, you work at Napster. So obviously, I'm sure you're pretty familiar with music. What is your favorite type of music?
Actually, ambient. And,
Ambient.
and when you think about ambient, right, this is just a background noise. And then going back to my wife, she looks and says, Alex, I think, you forgot to turn off the shower, right? But basically, my favorite is the ambient. It really gets me thinking, and it creates that background environment where my thoughts flow.
That's interesting. So the opposite now, what kind of sounds or noise do you hate?
Sounds or noise that I hate? I mean, honestly, when I'm on a conference call or I'm recording something or I'm about to present and I work out of my house and somebody next door is cutting grass. That is honestly speaking, that is the most. And by the way, we still have a few more minutes, right? I'm actually surprised that nobody's doing any construction outside or something like this. But that's when I get the most anxious and embarrassed, right? Because it really gets in the way of me presenting.
That's nice. If you were to invite a historical figure to dinner, who would you pick and why?
That is an interesting question, and I think it's very important that we learn from our history. Somehow, I always kind of live in the present time, right? I really never thought about this. This is something. This is definitely something that I'm gonna think about, right? Yeah. I don't have an answer beyond that.
Oh, so maybe something will come up after the next two questions then. What is your favorite word?
What is my favorite word?
And you can say innovation.
No, I think actually innovation is it's a horrible word in a way. It's so hard to define, right? It means, it's a great word, and but it means so many things to different people. That's why I think there's so many people that are arguing about innovation, and there's nothing to argue about. It's just, it has a very different meaning to everybody. I really, honestly, I'm sorry, it's the second question that I'm not answering, but there are a lot of things that I learn about myself from my son Matthew, who is almost 5. So if I go, because he uses some language, and I'm like, oh, where did you learn that? And I was like, oh my God, that's from me, right? So I will get back to you, because I'm sure that if I ask him, he might come back with an instant answer, and I'm not sure I'll like it.
Okay. What is your favorite vacation spot?
I travel a lot for work, right? Sometimes, there were years when I'm on the road for 100 days in a year, right? So at the end of the day, I think it's being home. Honestly, it's really being home with my family. And, oh, by the way, listen, I came up with an answer of my alternative profession. It's what would be the thing that I dream about? Being a stay-at-home dad, perhaps.
Oh, that's very unusual.
Right, you were so right. I would come up with an answer, but yes, it's really being home and being with my family and talking to my neighbors. Planting tomatoes and looking and putting the food for birds into the bird feeder. So yes, thank you for making me realize what my alternative profession could be.
You're welcome.
It's really being a dad, and the second child is on the way, and I'm really super excited about it.
Well, congratulations for your second child then. What is the way for our listeners to follow you and Cisco on social media?
Oh, just follow Cisco. I'm on Twitter and easy to find. I'm on LinkedIn, and obviously at Cisco on Twitter and LinkedIn. There's so many ways. There's hashtag Cisco Innovates. I think the most important hashtag that would get people a perspective into Cisco is the one that's called We Are Cisco. Right, because
yes.
We Are Cisco is about everyday employee experience, and this is something that we tag in our daily lives as we go through our day in social media, and I think that will get a listener a good glimpse into the company and most importantly, how people innovate in their jobs.
Yes, and completely agree. And I did a podcast with one of your colleagues who's your social media guru at Cisco, Carmen Collins, a few months ago. Any last word of advice or wisdom for our listeners?
I mean, honestly, it's all about, I think there are a couple of things, right? One is what I really learned over time is at the end of the day, it's all about execution. It is exceptionally important to have a big vision. It is exceptionally important to have a strategy. And it's as important to execute in small, measurable milestones. So my advice would be, I'm sure there are plenty of great projects. It's very important that people approach innovation with a dream and a big vision, and execute in chunks, measure, and most importantly, communicate the value to others.
Well, thank you, Alex. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this.
Thanks for tuning in to the EX Podcast. If you want to learn more, visit our website at expodcast.com. If you want to find out more about our next conferences, go to exsummit.com. Finally, you can also find my manifesto on business to employee or B2E branding at b2ebranding.co. See you next week.